have a special guest joining us on Action Hour, Whidbey Island resident, zero waste practitioner, and career environmentalist, David Haskell. A fourth-generation Californian, David received his degree in conservation of natural resources from the University of California, Berkeley, before becoming a longtime resident of New Zealand, where he served as the director of the New Zealand Ministry of Energy's Conservation and Renewable Resources Division. Is that correct?
That works.
Okay, did that work? And as a zero waste consultant for the New Zealand Zero Waste Trust. David co-authored the New Zealand Waste Minimization Strategy with the University of Canterbury and has been the recipient of the commemoration medal presented to David by Queen Elizabeth for his service to New Zealand in the field of resource conservation. While in New Zealand, David also served as CEO of Pacific Plastic Recyclers and senior partner with Mountain Valley Resources, a lead consultant for government solid waste plans. More recently, David has served as chair for the Sierra Club's San Francisco Bay chapter and California State Zero Waste Commissions. David and his wife Kiki now live on Whidbey Island, where David is involved in the Whidbey Climate Action Movement as a board member. David says that he is cursed with knowledge, which he plans to pass on to us today. Thank you for being here with me, David.
Well, thank you for that, Amanda. And I want to just tell you, listeners, that it is a curse. Mm-hmm. I mean, ignorance, once you get beyond ignorance, then if you don't act, it's actually negligence. And so that once you know, then you have an obligation to respond. And in fact, that's one of the primary tenets of the environmental legislation in New Zealand.
Really? That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to curse our audience, but I do want to enlighten our audience and also kind of talk about the complications around waste and the concept of zero waste and how it is practiced well and how it is very hard to practice in our society. And so, two things that we said that we would talk about together is the zero waste movement and then also organic waste in Island County in particular. And so the first thing that I want to ask you is, how would you define waste?
Oh, well, you've hit on a special one, because so much of the language of waste is predicated on kind of greenwash. It's as I've always said, waste is a verb. It's not a noun. Mm. When you go back to the creator in the original natural state, is that there is no such thing as waste. Mm-hmm. Any material that is used in as excess, where it gets passed on and cycled until the cycle is complete and it returns back in its form. And so that's the biomimicry that really the 20th century, the 19th century really is the first time in human history that we've come into a place of materials that are not biocompatible. They are synthetic. They are filled with chemicals. They are toxic. And it really is this level of toxicity that really then you start looking at that as a waste byproduct. That needs to be managed out of the system so it maintains its own integrity, and so things are biocompatible. Biocompatible is a great word. It's one of my favorite when it comes to materials. Yeah, because it can go back into the environment and add to the environment. It's a part of the environment. So this notion of waste as I like to use the word discard. You no longer have any more use for it, so you discard it. In the discard, then you have a multiplicity under a great system. You have a multiplicity of places where it can go. Maybe it goes to senior thrift. Maybe it goes to Habitat for Humanity. Maybe it goes to repurpose here in Whidbey Island where it gets recycled. So that there are different choices there. So that's the kind of concept I have about what that's about.
When you say biomimicry, what do you mean by that?
Biomimicry is a discipline that looks at nature as a model and then tries to mimic nature insofar as you can't really improve on Mother Earth, on Mother Nature. When you look at the kind of extraordinary designs that you look at and the thing is that's the system we've lived in for millions of years. That's it. And so if you can sustain if you mimic that system, you'll be closer to being a part of that system. So biomimicry is used in industrial design. It's used in all kinds of different packaging. It should be. But in biomimicry, it very much is a part of what zero waste is. Zero waste itself is a systematic approach looking at the whole process of material flows through a society. You're looking at the material flow. So the words like waste, it just doesn't carry any weight. It's the material, it's the flow of materials, and you're trying to make it so it's biocompatible. And any kind of the toxic stuff you're trying to design right out of the box, so that your designers for a product, they have a choice. They have a choice. And sadly, the choice is that the external cost to the environment, it doesn't cost them a penny. So McDonald's or Coca-Cola or anybody who wants to create a product, they can create the product without having to pay for the consequences of its disposal. So our whole system is kind of predicated on a get out of jail free card for polluters. And so the concept of polluter pays. If you pollute, you pay, and you got to pay to remediate what you created. That's part of the zero waste concept too.
So it sounds like there's, for centuries, millennia, whatever, we've been in a cycle of reciprocity, like resource reciprocity with the earth. And a certain point, that cycle got tipped out of balance, and we started creating products that are not compatible with the planet. Could you pinpoint for me when that happened?
I don't know. That one's a tough one, Amanda. I think I heard one story that's worth sharing is that this is a bit. It's like one of the problems that was created is when a person stopped riding their horse to town. They started driving their car to town. And it created a problem because as long as you had to rely on the horse to get to town, the horse had to be healthy. And the only way the horse had to be healthy is that the land had to be healthy, because that's what fed the horse. And so we stopped caring for the land.
Yeah.
And suddenly the relationship that we have to care for the land in order for us to get the services we need, that became abrogated. I'm not suggesting that Henry Ford is the curse that we talked about earlier, but yet it's this departure from relying on the fertility of the earth and its fruits. We can then think we can play Merlin the magician and create all these chemical compounds because we can make more money from them. We can design new products. And all of those, and there's a lot of unintended consequences in this process. People do things for the best of intent. I know that the story goes with ammonia. Ammonia was used to keep people's food, as a working fluid in refrigerators, to keep people's food fresh. It saved all of that food waste, and it was a healthy thing to do. But that ammonia ended up, if it escaped, would end up killing people because it's toxic. So what do we end up doing? We end up inventing CFCs and all those refrigerants that were then used to keep food safe. But then we discovered that the refrigerants were the things that were destroying the ozone in the atmosphere and causing cancer and destroying everything. So there's our dear old friend Warren Miles. Ward Miles, he'd always say, well, today's solutions are tomorrow's problems, David.
Yes.
And so that a lot of times the way in which we design and see our product in the economy, in the material flow, is that we don't design it all the way from a lot of people in zero waste talk about cradle to grave.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite thing is from conception to reincarnation.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So it's really about what are the consequences of all those chemicals, all that interaction. What are you going to do with it that is never really brought forward or understood? And it's not a part of the economic equation when people make their initial decision.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a lot of our relationship with product and discard and what we call waste, but that you would not maybe, not a noun, it's a verb, but with our relationship with things, right? Like things in this world, objects that man has created. It sounds like a lot of what we are dealing with is a problem of design. Like we've designed our way into an environmental catastrophe. Do you believe we can design our way out of it?
That's the premise of zero waste. Mm-hmm. That's the actual concept, because it's a systematic approach to literally design waste out of the production and consumption process. Mm-hmm. Production consumption, it's a marriage. You can't have production without consumption. So the consumer is just as responsible as the producer because they become a partner in the product. Mm-hmm. So it is the systematic approach. And of course, there's multiple layers, and we can get fairly detailed here, but there's multiple layers because there is the actual production of the product, the extraction. Let's go all the way back to extraction, because when you start looking at a big pie chart, mm-hmm. this is really an interesting thing. You look at a big pie chart of all the proverbial waste that mm-hmm. exists, and the municipal solid waste fraction mm-hmm. that we automatically think of as that's our waste. That's because that's what we put out in the curbside. That's what goes into landfills. But that's just a sliver of the overall waste that exists in the larger production cycle, because you have in the extraction, you have huge waste when it comes to mountaintop mining of coal. Mm-hmm. You've got extraordinary amounts of waste when it comes into harvesting corn. Mm-hmm. All this kind of waste, and then you have all the external waste, so whether the topsoil that goes down the Mississippi River, and so you start looking at it from a much more holistic viewpoint. Now, zero waste itself tends to be more focused on the consumer products that we see every day in our life, mm-hmm. because that's where it starts to work onto. But and that's all part of the scheme. But it's like we look at electric cars and we look at cobalt as a part of their constituents of the batteries. And of course, that's mined in mm-hmm. the deepest parts of the Congo, and you got all these pictures of these young kids getting poisoned doing it. So that there is in the zero waste concept, there's an appreciation of everything. It's the life cycle of that product. And that's where we started here too, Amanda, that at the end of its life cycle, it needs to be returned so that it can be remade mm-hmm. and repurposed and continue to be used. And if it ever ceases to have any function, then the material is then biocompatible to the earth. And so we don't destroy the thing that we rely on. Mm-hmm. There you go.
So you said from conception to reincarnation was kind of that
Yeah, I like that. That cradle to grave is just too short. Your conception can happen at any. You've got to really think about it.
Right, okay. Or like from extraction to reentry, or something like that. But within this framework, what are kind of the different milestones in the life cycle of any given product? You mentioned extraction, or say there's like even just like the conception, an idea of a product. I think it actually like starts in probably an idea that someone has and also a need that they're trying to fill, which I think a lot of consumerism, there's the question of like, how much do we actually need, right? Like our economy also runs on consumerism, which is not necessarily great for the environment, just as as an economic system, right? But say that consumption is a part of human behavior, what are the different steps in the life cycle of a product? Well, okay, no, two questions. What is the standard? What are the standard steps in the life cycle of a product? And how would a zero waste lens change those steps?
I think it's, as I touched on, it's the recognition that there is a life cycle. Mm-hmm. That's really important. If you don't see it as a life cycle, you just see, oh, I'm just a plastics manufacturer and I produce buckets. That's all I do. I produce buckets or I produce plastic bags. And all they're looking for is to buy the chemicals out of the wholesale market and at the cheapest price they can, and they produce the plastic and they put it out there. But if you actually see yourself as a part of a bigger sort of the economy of commerce kind of concept that a lot of people have written about. Back in the 1990s, it was a big deal. We talked a lot about that, but yet the impacts of the kind of compounded interest and economic growth really has subsumed a lot of that kind of philosophical thinking. And of course, we also have a conflict because we have this thing called free markets. And when you start looking at the number of chemicals that are regulated versus the number of chemicals in the economy, it's just a sliver. I mean, it's almost like when you bring a product to market, you don't have to prove that it's biocompatible. It really is oftentimes seen as an after effect that, oh, this particular product, you know, whatever it be, whether it's fire retardant in children's pajamas or furniture, or whether it's, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You end up identifying a problem further downstream, and then you regulate against it. And of course, there's been one of our profound struggles in our society is regulation. How much regulation do we need? And from a really deep ecology perspective, we cannot let anything be produced that is going to destroy the earth. And yet we don't have that kind of regulatory framework or that capacity to make sure that when a product is designed, that it has to meet certain standards. Now, obviously, in the year 2024, we have a much higher degree of control of that process, or we hope we do. But it's a real conflict. I mean, look at the recent Supreme Court judgment with the Chevron opinion, which took out of the regulatory capacity, said you cannot regulate that because you're impinging upon the freedom of production. That was scary. So that there is this side of it, and so that, but you got extraction one, and then you have the transport that's all involved in all of this. There's transport this, transport that. And of course, as a part of Whidbey Climate Action, it was a part of all of our endeavors that all of us and you and all the good people at the Whidbey Island Environmental Network are all working on is we have to reduce our greenhouse gas side of it. So, you know, what do? We put a carbon tax on everything. So we try to reduce the amount there. But this is all part of the system, the systematic approach at designing waste from beginning to end of a production cycle for a product that really zero waste tries to be a part of. And so it's kind of hard because most of the kind of conversation we have about zero waste is at a very domestic level. It's almost like looking down the wrong end of the telescope.
Yes, that we think about the ways that we can reduce waste in our daily lives, which is helpful maybe from a an emotional perspective and also from a personal ethical responsibility perspective, but does not address the systemic and industry that is producing waste at a scale that none of us, are. I mean, we are involved in the waste cycle, and as consumers are like the end user of a lot of products unless they go back into the system in a way that's,
there's this idealized notion of the market that as consumers, we drive what's supplied. Mm-hmm. With the consolidation of manufacturing, when it comes to buying a soft drink, they're all in plastic containers. There's not very many in glass. I mean, I always prefer, from a perspective, I always buy everything in aluminum because an aluminum can be recycled into itself. It can be used infinitely again and again and again and again. So there are lots of things that we as consumers can do to make our life more reflecting zero waste.
Yes, which I want to ask you about that, just like in terms of like little, or not little things, but like kind of mindset shifts that we can take as individuals. But first, I want to kind of address, a little bit of about what you've said about markets and regulation, and just kind of ask, have there been times where zero waste has been implemented into policy and industry and been successful? And do you know, and in what context? And then are there any failures that you think are important for people to know about in terms of kind of understanding the larger conundrum of product?
Yeah, no, we end up, we're a bit myopic because we have an American perspective. And globally, there's some companies that have just done extraordinarily well. You look at some of, Toyota, Subaru, some of the manufacturers, BMW, and some of the cars, they've designed them so they can be reverse engineered and taken apart, and then in the material side, they can either be repurposed, recycled, or whatever it might be. And they've been very successful. I actually, in my life, I worked for this wonderful man, Stephen Tyndall, who happened to be the richest man in New Zealand, which was very fortunate for me working for him. But he also was the underwriter for the New Zealand Zero Waste Trust.
Oh, cool.
And Stephen, basically, he went around America as a young man, and he saw Sam Walton in Walmart. And he saw what that would do and how that worked, and he understood it. And he went back to New Zealand. And he created a franchise called the Warehouse. And the Warehouse was nearly in every single little town in New Zealand. And it was the major seller of shoes. It was the major seller. It became the dominant retail force in the New Zealand economy. Now, in that, Stephen recognized that he had a responsibility, and so. Initially, in my role as the Pacific Plastic Recycler CEO, I worked with all of his stores so that all of the plastic, which is shrink wrap, right? Mm-hmm. Shrink wrap. Mm-hmm. LDPE, it's ubiquitous because everything gets shipped in it and wrapped in.
Wait, what is LDPE?
Low density polyethylene. This is part of the curse.
Okay.
I learned more about plastic during that job than I ever wanted to, but there's low density polyethylene, which is number 4 on the number 4 on the hit parade. I keep kind of giving you visuals, thinking we're going to be seen, but
it's okay.
It's number 4 is also bread bags.
Yeah,
there are lots of them. But anyway, with Stephen, I ended up collecting all of the plastics from his stores, and they would ship them to me. He would pay the price. And he'd ship them down to our little factory down near Wellington, and we would then turn them into our finished product. It was great. So that's an example. But then he went a step further, and he then hired me, and he had his own environmental manager. And we basically got to the point where we took every single waste bin out of all of his stores. We took it away. I mean, there's one way to have zero waste to landfill is you take away the landfill. And then what do you do with it? And of course, what he did with it then is that we worked with his suppliers. We didn't need to have that shoe stuffed with paper, because who wants the shoe stuffed with paper? I mean, the supplier thought we didn't want it, so they stopped it. We ended up, instead of having every shirt wrapped up, we had every 30 shirts wrapped up. We ended up working all the way up the supply chain saying, we don't want your waste. And then at the end of the day in the store, that big truck that would deliver their products every day, well, that truck went back and reverse logistics and took any discarded material in that store and took it back to central warehousing. And then from that central warehousing place, what was interesting is that there were a lot of products that had been returned because, a little widget had fallen off a blanket, or this hadn't worked, or that hadn't worked. So what the warehouse learned is they got much better quality control over the product they were selling. So they saved a lot of money there. And secondly, they'd bring all these things back into a central place. And of course, my better question to you about waste is that you don't create waste until you mingle it together. It's commingling it. It's once you throw anything.
That's what makes it garbage, right?
That's what makes it garbage.
Yeah, but anything becomes garbage when you commingle it. You've called it clean streams.
I did. I wrote a report once on, we were clean streaming a whole town, and I love the concept. I picked it up from a Welsh concept. And then I learned in Sweden, they have collection of discards in 64 different streams.
Wow.
So that in as long as you keep, the alkaline batteries separate, as long as you keep the polystyrene clothes hangers separate, as long as you keep the milk bottles separate, they are a resource able to be used and reused into new products. It's when you put them all together and you throw a little toxicity on top of them, and a lot of food waste that just makes them all gooey and horrible and dangerous and, downright filled with bacteria, that it becomes trash, garbage. And and that's where the other system that's really important is that we have the production, the consumption, but then we have the end use management of our discards. And right now, and here on Whidbey Island, we've got a one bin mentality. We only get picked up one bin out, in these big dirty trucks, drive up and down every single little lane and road in this county once a week, spewing huge amounts of CO2 out of their diesel trucks, picking up the waste, and then bingo, it's all waste. So that this notion that the system that then collects and distributes, as we as a community have a chance to say, hold it. Hold it. This is not the way to go. The story I told that in my presentation is that it's the story of Winnie the Pooh. It's Christopher Robin walking down a set of stairs, and Pooh Bear, he's holding on to Pooh Bear with his leg, and who knows there's a better way to go downstairs, but every time he goes down a step, he hits his head, and 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 he tries to think about what's better systems, but he keeps hitting his head, and he can't hold the idea anymore. And that's how I kind of feel like we're on our waste system. But the tragedy, of course, Amanda, is that that waste system that Island County, with our 60,000, 70,000 residents, it's costing us $10 million.
Yeah. So there's also the economic cost,
the direct costs.
Yeah. And
then there's the environmental costs, which we can talk about as we get into organic.
Yes. Yeah. That's so it's interesting because I'm wondering if in terms of the US, right? Because you've talked about New Zealand and kind of their, I guess, very much more progressive take on waste management. But in the US and in the state of Washington, what are kind of the policies around waste management? Do you know?
There is legislation. There's policy frameworks that tries to mandate, but yet at the same time, there are infrastructure, and this is a big one. There are infrastructure investments in the state of Washington that have, for instance, on Whidbey Island, where is Away? I throw it away. Well, Away is a place called Roosevelt Landfill down on the Columbia River. It's a 2,500 acre site that is designed to carry 140 million tons of waste. And it's designed to go for the next 40 years.
Yes, and this is right on the river, right? It's on the border.
Right, it's literally the train that takes all our waste down there, goes down to the Columbia, goes up the Columbia, along the banks, and the train is a mile long. It just seems to go forever. If you live over on Possession Beach side of the island, and you look across and you hear the train going, and there's those two trains that go every day, the garbage train and the coal trains. And you go, oh God, if there's, who would ever, it's painful to watch. But yet it is literally on the Columbia River. You have to, it's about 2,000 feet above the Columbia. So there's quite a hill to climb. And of course, you can imagine that that train collects from all into Canada. It collects all around our region. It's a big regional landfill. They instead of all these little landfills everywhere, we have a little landfill in Coopville that they're still paying to try to keep from polluting the ground. So, okay, a little landfills aren't very, they're polluting and they're non-economic. You got to clean them up. I spent a lot of my time in New Zealand closing landfills. But at the same time, I also spent a fair amount of time trying to extend them and make them be more useful. And I guess part of the system, this is this receiving system that we've got. If we just think we can bury everything and bury it and bury it and bury it and bury it and bury it, then of course, that's where overshoot, overconsumption, this whole becomes just insane. And of course, what amazed me yesterday, I happened to have a carpet that I had to take out of my new house. And for the very first time, I drove up to Coopville and I had to dispose of my waste carpet. There are carpet companies that take their product back, and we can talk about extended producer responsibility. But I had some I just painted my house, got a lot of paint cans, and I had a little bit of organic waste because I pulled out some material and I wanted to, put my new garden in. And so I drove up to the scale and I said, I'm hoping the right place. She said, yes, you are. She weighed me up. And I said, well, I have some organic waste and I've got some tin cans and I've got an old carpet. And she said, oh, I want you to put it all over there into that big bin. And she didn't say, please take the tin cans over to recycling. Please take the organic waste down to the other place. But she had me commingle it all into this great big skip. And that's really the way in which the whole mentality of our service industries has it. There are ways that we can redesign. And I think part of what I think we have to do is that we have to come together as a community and really talk about what can we do. And this is not, highest and best use stuff.
Yeah, it's not highest and best use. And I know that, in the second half of this conversation, we're going to talk specifically about organic waste and the ways in which, as a county, we're pretty far behind in terms of managing our organic waste. And but I think you mentioned extended producer responsibility, and I'm hoping that you could kind of explain what that means, what extended producer responsibility means.
It kind of goes back to our earlier discussion about the whole production cycle.
Yes.
And Extended producer responsibility is really another form of regulation. And it was initiated in Sweden. I keep using the Swedes, although I don't want to make the Swedes sound so wonderful, because they do a good job all the way up to the end of the pipeline. And then the Swedish rely on incineration.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to bookmark that. I want to talk about design strategies too. Like before, but because that's interesting. Okay.
I mean, in some ways, zero waste is zero waste to landfill, zero waste to incineration, and zero waste to ocean or any. It's don't put it in the environment. And incineration, that's another. Yeah,
we'll talk. We can talk about that in a second. Yeah. But so what is?
But extended producer responsibility is basically stating that the producer of the goods is responsible for the life cycle of their product all the way through to consumption, collection, and repurposing, just whatever it is. But the problem that happened in Europe when they initiated it, the Europeans are much better at having rules, particularly the Germans. The Germans instituted extended producer responsibility that quite literally, people could unwrap the products in the retail store and give people the package, give the shop owner the packaging and say, okay, it's your problem, not mine, it's yours. And so the concept of extended producer responsibility is they design, as we stated before, they design waste out of the product. They make it easily recyclable. And what they did in Europe is they created a whole standards for recyclability. That you could not ship a product into Europe that wasn't in a recyclable container. Quite simple, not just recyclable, but recycled. There's a big difference. I mean, I can recycle just about anything, but yet I need to have the systems in place to collect it and to do the work. So that polypropylene, number 5 on the great hit parade, is a wonderful plastic. It's wonderful in quotes, plastic, and it's eminently recyclable. But nobody collects it. And so there's another bigger story here about recycling industry and how it's broken and how the Chinese broke it for everybody else in the world. But I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole. But
maybe not right now, but
it's been really hard. We don't have the systems in place to create, recyclable has to be recycled. And in actual fact, one thing that very few people know, you don't truly recycle a product until you buy it back.
Wait,
recycling only takes place when you buy the product that you put into the bin to be remade. You bought it back. That is true recycling. Putting cans in a bin is source separation. Anyway, that's another little kind of, you have to really literally go out and buy products that are made from a recycled material. And that's true recycling. But extended producer responsibility put the onus on the manufacturer. And we have one gentleman here who's a great friend and a real advocate for this concept, Sago Jackson here on the island. And Sago has a long history of working with this and trying to make it better. But one of the problems with extended producer responsibility, and particularly in California, where I've had the experience, is that, okay, we gave the responsibility to the industry, and they said, okay, no problem. And they just produced it, and they said, well, we'll incinerate it. We'll destroy it. There was no performance criteria at the end of the life cycle, and it had to be biocompatible and reused and had to have go zero to landfill. It was just, we have extended producer responsibility. And so in certain products, it's been successful. For instance, tires. Tires are a real problem because you can't throw them away to landfill because they have this magical capacity to pop up through the membranes and pop up like a growing, like an iris. But
No.
they're funny. They just like a bulb that grows. You can't put them in a landfill. They just don't behave, tires. And so the tire companies need to take them back and regrind them down and make them again. Okay, that's good. So tires taken care of. One of the most recycled products any place is automobile batteries. Mm-hmm. So automobile companies, they have a $5, $10, whatever bounty, and they pick it up and they pay for it, and they recycle that plastic and the lead back into new batteries. Paint is another really good industry that has a paint care. You can take your half-empty paint cans back to a paint shop, and they accept them. They're supposed to. That's part of the supposed to. That's part of this things. And so that another, there's an issue with hazardous waste in terms of, say, like fluorescent light bulbs. There are different industries that start participating in paying for the cost of the product is reflected in its care, aftercare, after use care. So they integrated that. So it's when you say it like that and describe it like that, you say, oh, that's a wonderful idea. That's really good. But the problem is that there are so many different kinds of products and so many different responsibilities and this and that, so that I know the Sierra Club, they drank the extended producer responsibility Kool-Aid right to the max. They drank it. And they felt that the solution for the municipal solid waste was that extended producer responsibility for all material products, and any organic need to be composted, and then say that's the end of the story. That's it. That's done. But of course, it didn't work out that way, and it even made it more difficult at sometimes, particularly here in the Northwest, because there has been extended producer responsibility. So that, say, like for paper, and the company that introduces the paper then collects the paper back. Well, what happens to the recycling company that used to collect the paper? He doesn't get his product anymore. He's just lost everything he baked, like cardboard. Suddenly the cardboard gets the extended producer responsibility, and the recycler doesn't get his revenue, and they go out of business. And when they go out of business, then nobody collects so it cascades down. And so there was this lack of integration with extended producer responsibility. I can see it. If I was, if I was in charge of all this thing, I would just charge the industry a fee, and then use that fee to support independent recyclers everywhere and communities everywhere, to then manage a system that had some kind of intent of where it's going and knew what products it was going to allow to be introduced into the system.
Like a extended producer responsibility tax, like a taxation system?
Yeah, it's almost like it's the same kind of concept as a carbon tax. You're trying to drive the negative impacts out of the product. So that absolutely, as what you say, it penalizes the companies. They got to spend money, and that money is then used on a community basis. Because why are we as ratepayers paying $10 million to get our garbage collected and this and that, and when it really we're just giving the producers a pass? They get a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, they make profit without having to deal with the consequences. And then I think that's what's interesting about kind of the disconnect between industry and individual consumerism is the second you started talking about that rug, I had an emotional reaction to it, because I feel like every time I throw something out, it's like a crisis. and like having like little crises all day long, being like, well, what are my other options? Like what do I do? And I think there are some options. So I kind of want to talk about like how we as individuals can practice being or how we as individuals can incorporate the zero waste philosophy into our lives in a way that is, not all of it is going to be compatible with every lifestyle, right? There's some people, like I've talked about this with Marnie, where it seems like the further, if you are lower on the economic scale, you're also probably further away from a zero waste lifestyle because of the need for convenience and accessibility and like low cost. right? That like we've kind of also set up a system where like what is convenient is probably also pretty wasteful, right? So so if zero waste is inconvenient, like what are the ways that we can like purposely inconvenience ourselves and incorporate that into our daily lives? Like how do you do that?
Well, there's a number of examples that people who have literally decided not to produce any waste. Mm-hmm. And this word is pre-cycle. Mm-hmm. So that when you go to the store, you have your little bags that are nylon bags that you use again and again and again and again and again for all of your vegetables. Mm-hmm. That you have a beautiful little tin that you put all of your bulk foods. I mean, I shop a lot at the Goose. I love the Goose's concept. Mm-hmm. The community-owned enterprise, round up every time. Thank you. I look at that wall and I think of how good I feel because we're helping all these wonderful people help each other. Yeah,
Ween was a recipient. We were a roundup recipient.
Yeah, I mean, it's I love it. And the Goose is putting more and more for bulk products in, whether it's vinegars, whether it's honey, whether it's peanut butter, mm-hmm. a lot of these things. And so you end up buying those things. Mm-hmm. Kind of in the grocery store, stay to the outer aisle. Don't go into the middle. And so you've got and then you buy things as with as little packaging as possible. And mm-hmm. anything that is packaged, you make sure that it, please make it, recyclable. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you take out all of your food waste and you compost that. And you quite literally, you don't generate it. You're consciously going in there to pre-cycle so that you're buying things. You're going to have to bring in a bag, right? You're going to have to bring a bag full of little containers. Those containers, yes. You know how much they weigh. And I've dealt with some. I have a wonderful friend down in Marin County, Mark Squires, who's got this exquisite grocery store, Good Earth. He's got two of them. He's extraordinarily successful. Mm-hmm. He laughs at me. He says, "David, I don't know how I manage. I just make money. But he has the most beautiful organic thing." And he set his whole store up on bulk. Mm-hmm. You buy it by bulk. And it's so that you change your habits. And of course, eating more further down the food chain, eating mm-hmm. less processed foods, it's good for you. Yeah. Or your rice, your beans, whatever it might be. And so that helps you in that way. And of course, shop at the farmers markets. Mm-hmm. Do as much as you can. This time of year, it's just a delight, whether it's Bayview or whether it's Tilth or whether it's the little stand at Bush Point. There's so many places to eat. Get a relationship with your garden, with your farmer. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you really then just conspicuously choose to not try to avoid that packaging. And it's tough.
So that's pre-cycling. And it takes a lot of intention and time. And it also is an access thing because we live in a place where we actually can know our farmers and we can buy in bulk and, we can go to farm stands. For somebody who is listening to this, who maybe lives in an urban environment, what would you recommend for them? Is there any way to kind of?
There's still always you have the, like in Columbia City and Seattle. I mean, the PCC there, mm-hmm. that is a grocery store. You've got to have a relationship to not only just your farmer, but to your retailer and grocery stores. Mm-hmm. And I haven't had a chance to do this yet. I think we're going to go back to the people like Goose or at Payless, I don't know, and see the bigger stores in town to see whether we can work with them to help them be a part of the solution rather than just contributing to the problem mindlessly. Mm-hmm. And I know the Goose, they're contributing to the solution. Mm-hmm. And so it's about being part of a bigger community effort. Yeah. Let's do this together. And all you can do is, ubiquitous plastic bags. We get rid of them. We get rid of the kinds of things. And
once you know better, you do better, right? That's
this thing of this. We started talking about the curse, and it's not curse, but it's enlightenment. Okay, so we're enlightening people And we all got such bad habits.
We do. I have them. I'm totally guilty of habits of convenience. I think they mostly are. And mindlessness, like you mentioned, mindless, participation. And I do think that, practicing zero waste or contributing less to the waste cycle is a mindfulness practice. It's like a mindfulness meditation. I think it also, for me in my life, I would like to think about it in terms of, can I slow down enough to do this? And if I can't, why not? And what's wrong?
Yep. Well, this is where if you're poor, you don't have a lot of money, you tend to buy things when you need them, and you don't buy them in bulk. So you tend to buy, I guess there'd be this ratio of packaging to product. Your packaging to product ratio would be quite high. You'd have a lot of packaging. And then, of course, then you have cheap food. And it's the social equity of but it's interesting. In my travels, I traveled through Asia too, and in my time in Pakistan. If you threw a tin can out the window, you'd come back 10 minutes later and it would be gone. But somebody would pick it up and be using it to drink their water out of. And so that a lot of this waste issues that we've generated, it's a first world problem.
Yes.
But although you go into some of these poorer countries and third world countries, and the level of plastic pollution is just painful. You get certain things that are just painful. But
I remember going and visiting India, and they had no central municipal waste collection. Like there was actually like no system set up for it at the time. It was like in 2010, and there would just be piles of garbage, just like mounds of it in the middle of, communities next to farms, just out in the open. And I think that I think you're right, where there's like, when we talked earlier about being close to the land, right? That like the proximity to the land and the life cycle of a product to biomimicry, as you said earlier, like there's a certain point in maybe in certain cultures and lifestyles where like you might be considered to have less resources than people in the first world, but be closer to the land than people in the first world. There's kind of this like pocket of, especially in American society, where we are considered a first world country, but the people in our society who have the least amount of resources are subject to the most amount of potential, like plastic waste, for example.
They have the least ability. I mean, it's a really hard one, particularly now with the you go into. Well, I've lived in South America, in Peru, and different places that they get. It's almost like a dump. They get dumped. I mean, China got dumped all that waste plastic for years because they thought they could manage it and do it, but it didn't work. But then Africa became the dump for all the materials, all the electronic waste, and we have to. And this is where regulation and control and some kind of vision about where we're going really becomes preeminent. And our wasting paradigm. Is one that we just have to, recognize. We have to assess.
Acknowledge it's happening.
Acknowledge it's happening. See what we can do best.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a real problem here on Whidbey is that I need more information. I know that the amount of diesel fuel used to collect the garbage, and then they go to Coupeville, and Coupeville they then have a compactor, and there's about 8 trucks a day that are 25 tons. So let's just say 200 tons a day, then gets trucked up. And these trucks, what are they getting? A couple of miles per gallon, a 28-ton truck. You'll be lucky to get that for mileage. And they then drive the 40 miles to Burlington, where they load it onto the rail. They drive back another 40 miles. And then you've got the Burlington railways that get something like they 500 gallons of gas for every 100 miles or something, 500 gallons of diesel for every 100 miles. It's quite extraordinary. So that you look at that level of system there, and then they got the trucks taking it from the rail up to the top of the Roosevelt landfill. And so you've got this extraordinarily carbon intensive system. Mm-hmm. And we know that just I believe that is probably the single greatest contributor to greenhouse gases that we all participate here in Whidbey Island by far. I can't imagine anything else that comes close to that. I mean, individual cars, and you add up all the gallons that are sold, and if a gallon of gas is 22.5 pounds of CO2. Okay. And you do the multiplier, and it's not hard to figure out, but we need to have information so that we can say, what is the best use for this? Mm-hmm. What can we do for this? And of course, I don't know whether this is the segue into composting or not, but the great irony, the great pain for me in speaking to Derek Kishimoto and these different people on the island. And Derek says to me, David, I think 50% of everything that goes to to Roosevelt landfill is organic.
On our next episode, David and I will continue our conversation and dive into Island County's organic waste problem. Until next time.
Another man up in the pulpit in the State House. Head of the table with a black pen, scratching egos, talking too loud. Externalize every outcome, every warm gun, every profit. And kneeling down to the flashing numbers, the NASDAQ, the cold constructs. Running backwards, so just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. Unlearning every lesson that our mothers tried to teach us.
This podcast is a production of the Whidbey Environmental Action Network and is made possible by our generous donors. Produced, edited, and mixed by me, Amanda Bullis. Special thanks to Marianne and Steve for their years of service through action and for lending their voices to this podcast. To WEEN's Executive Director, Marnie Jackson, and our board for their leadership. Special thanks to Whidbey musician and WEEN board member, Nathaniel Talbot, for letting us use his track, Intuition, from the album Animal, available on Bandcamp.
Every day on your paycheck, a volume of confidence against the idea of your body being put into your own hands. So please don't hold it, please don't hold it, please don't hold it back. Unleash the power, the straight logic of compassion. What I need now ain't that old religion or the cold hard facts. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Just need a woman's intuition, get us on track. Stepping out of the shadow of a false man's allegory, slowly erasing that old violence from the story. Recoupling emotion, slow emotion to intelligence, granting the planters, healers, teachers, feelers a new relevance. What I need now